My name is Mark. I've been married to Amanda for 5 years. Our life was always simple. No extra luxury, but with a clear purpose to build a future together. We had our rhythm, our us, which I thought was unshakable. I worked long hours, sometimes 12 hours a day, to provide for us. Amanda stayed home, managing the household and occasionally taking on small freelance projects. We weren't rich, but I always believed we were happy. My brother Jake was a frequent guest in our home. He was what you might call a people magnet, charismatic, always smiling, always ready with a joke. Everyone loved him, friends, family, everyone. Amanda always welcomed him warmly. Their conversations were light and effortless. She laughed at his jokes, and I saw it as nothing more than friendliness. Jake is family, I thought, so it never crossed my mind to look for anything suspicious. But over time, I began to notice little things. Amanda became more distant. She started hiding her phone more often, or taking it with her even to the bathroom. Her habit of laughing at Jake's jokes now seemed a bit excessive to me. One evening, when I came home from work, I saw her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. She didn't even notice me walk in. "Amanda, are you okay?" I asked, sitting down next to her. "Yes, everything's fine," she replied, not even lifting her eyes from the screen. That moment stayed in my memory, because it was the first time I felt that something between us had changed. My doubts grew stronger when Jake visited us again. I used to enjoy his visits, but now something about their behavior unsettled me. They sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and laughing at something I couldn't hear. I walked into the room, and their conversation suddenly stopped. What did I miss? I asked, trying to hide my unease. "Oh, nothing important," Amanda said with a smile. But that smile wasn't the same as before. There was something in it I couldn't quite place, but it made me feel like a stranger in my own home. The little things started to form a bigger picture. Her staying out late, sudden meetups with friends, new clothes she bought without any occasion. One evening, as I lay in bed, Amanda stayed in the kitchen with her phone. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something wrong about it. I began to wonder, could I have been wrong about our marriage? Was everything between us as stable as I always thought? One evening, Jake came over again. It was a typical evening. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through the news on my phone while Amanda was preparing something in the kitchen. Jake arrived, as always, with his carefree smile and a box of pizza in his hands. "Mark, I thought we could have dinner together tonight, just like the good old days," he exclaimed, setting the box on the table. I smiled. That was typical Jake. Always easygoing. Always in the mood for a life is a celebration attitude. He and Amanda started setting the table together. I could hear them chatting in the kitchen, laughing about something. Their voices sounded natural. But then, suddenly, the laughter stopped. I looked up and saw them exchange a glance. It lasted only a moment, but it was a moment that made me feel like something was off. Their look was filled with some kind of understanding, some kind of connection that I couldn't explain. During dinner, they continued joking. Amanda laughed at everything Jake said, even his most mundane jokes. In the past, I wouldn't have paid attention to it, but now it started to irritate me. "When did you become such a comedian, Jake?" I asked with a hint of sarcasm, trying to mask my unease. "Oh, it's just natural, bro," he replied, winking at Amanda. I wanted to convince myself it was just my imagination, but that wink felt like the final piece of a puzzle. Something wasn't right. That night, after Jake left, I sat in my chair, watching Amanda clear the table. Her movements were confident, but she avoided looking at me. "Amanda," I finally said, "you've seemed distant lately. Is something wrong?" She paused, then glanced over her shoulder at me. Her face looked normal, maybe even a little tired, but something in her gaze felt detached. "No, everything's fine," she replied with a faint smile. It was the same smile I'd seen 1,000 times before, but this time it felt fake. "Fine?" I asked, standing up from my chair. Amanda, we felt like strangers for weeks now. You barely talk to me anymore, and you're always glued to your phone. What's going on? She turned back to the sink and resumed washing dishes. Mark, you're just tired. You've been working too much, she said, trying to deflect. This isn't about me, I insisted. I feel like you're hiding something. She turned to face me, her expression serious. Mark, it's just exhaustion, she said, her voice rising slightly. I've never lied to you. Her words were meant to reassure me, but they only left me with more questions. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't fall asleep. Amanda slept beside me, but it felt like an invisible wall separated us. Her behavior, her glances, the way she spoke, all of it left me with the unsettling feeling that I was losing her. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, but that night I realized for the first time that our life might never be the same again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Amanda was lying beside me, her breathing even and calm. But I lay in the dark, feeling my heart tighten with unease. For weeks, I had been consumed by thoughts of her behavior. She had become more secretive, and every time I tried to get closer, it felt like a wall grew between us. Her phone sat on the nightstand. It had lit up several times that evening while she was still awake, but she always locked it quickly, even if I was just nearby. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but this nothing wouldn't let me rest. I knew her passcode. We had always trusted each other, and though I had never checked her phone before, tonight it felt like the only way to find answers. I reached out, picked up the phone, and entered the passcode. The screen unlocked, and I saw the message that changed everything. What we have is special. I can't wait to see you again. Jake. I froze. My heart seemed to stop. I read the message again, and then again, trying to convince myself it was some kind of joke or mistake. But it wasn't. It was him. My brother. I opened their chat. At first, the messages seemed harmless. Jokes, short conversations. But as I scrolled further, everything changed. Thank you for always understanding me. You make me feel alive. I couldn't stop thinking about you last night. Each message felt like a dagger to my heart. I kept reading, and it only got worse. They were discussing things that used to belong to Amanda and me. Our dreams, our plans. Now they had become theirs. I put the phone back on the nightstand, but sleep was impossible. All I could feel was pain and betrayal. How could she? How could they? My brother, whom I had always trusted, and my wife, who had promised to always be by my side. I lay in bed until dawn, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, waiting for Amanda to wake up. My hands trembled, and my thoughts crashed against each other like waves in a storm. When she walked into the kitchen, all I could feel was cold. The image of her, which used to bring me peace, now only brought pain. "Good morning," she said, grabbing a cup of coffee. I didn't reply. I just watched her as she sat down at the table. "Are you with Jake?" I asked directly, cutting through the silence. Amanda froze. Her hand, holding the coffee cup, stopped midway to her mouth. She looked at me, wide-eyed, but said nothing. "Don't pretend, Amanda. I saw your messages," I added, my voice sharp, almost detached. She put the cup down, sighed, and looked away, avoiding my gaze. "Mark," she began, but then stopped. "Speak," I demanded. "I need the truth." She covered her face with her hands, then finally spoke. I don't know how it happened. I felt invisible. And Jake, he gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. Invisible. I repeated, disbelief filling my voice. Wasn't what I gave you enough? I worked day and night to provide for us, to make sure you had everything you needed. "Mark, it's not about the money," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to feel needed, And you just stopped seeing me. Seeing you? I could barely contain myself. And you thought my brother was the solution? Amanda sobbed, struggling to find the right words, but I didn't want to hear them anymore. I don't know if I can forgive this, I said, standing up from the table. You've destroyed everything we had. I walked to the bedroom, leaving her sitting in the kitchen, silent and broken. Her words left me utterly shattered. I felt invisible. Jake gave me something you couldn't. These phrases echoed in my mind like an endless refrain, each time cutting deeper than the last. She didn't even try to justify herself. No, I'm sorry. No, I made a mistake. Her words were cold, but honest. And that was the worst part, knowing she had already made her choice. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. Our life together flashed before my eyes. Our first meeting, the laughter we shared, the promises that seemed unbreakable. And now it was all gone, ruins of what we had built together. I looked up at the closet. I realized I couldn't stay here any longer, in this house where every wall reminded me of us. I stood up, pulled a suitcase out from under the bed, and started packing my things. I folded clothes, books, and small items that once brought me joy. Each object was a part of my life with her, but now they felt empty, meaningless. Amanda stood in the doorway. I could feel her gaze on me, but I couldn't bring myself to turn and look at her. "Mark," she finally said, her voice trembling. "Don't," I replied without looking back. "There's nothing left to say." "I didn't want it to end like this," she added. I turned and looked at her. Her face was streaked with tears, but in her eyes, I saw no remorse. Only regret. Regret that she had been caught. "You didn't want this?" I said, my voice rising with anger. "What did you think, Amanda? That I'd never find out? That we'd keep living as if nothing happened?" She didn't respond. I zipped up the suitcase and placed it by the door. Then I walked to the kitchen. Everything was just as it had been yesterday. The cups we always used together, her favorite vase of flowers. All of it now felt alien. I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and started writing. "You chose him. I hope it's worth it." The words were simple, but they carried everything I felt: disappointment, pain, and most of all, finality. I left the note on the kitchen table, picked up my suitcase, and walked to the door. Amanda stood in the hallway, silently watching me. "Mark, please," she whispered, her voice weak. "Please what?" I asked, stopping. "Please don't go. Please forgive you. I can't hear this anymore, Amanda. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She didn't respond. I opened the door and walked out without looking back. As I left the house, I felt a strange sense of relief. The pain was still inside me, but now I knew it was over. I no longer clung to what once was. It was the beginning of a new chapter, though I didn't yet know how hard it would be. Weeks after leaving Amanda, my life slowly began to regain a sense of balance, though there were still many uncertainties. I tried to rediscover myself, spending time with friends, going to the gym, but there were moments when memories of Amanda and her betrayal would return like unwelcome guests. One evening, at a family gathering, I happened to meet Laura, Amanda's twin sister. She had always stayed out of the drama, and I hadn't paid much attention to her before, though we had spoken a few times. Laura entered the room with a cup of coffee, and I immediately noticed how different her demeanor was from Amanda's. She was calmer, more composed, and seemed more empathetic. It was a noticeable contrast to what had happened with Amanda. "Mark, I don't know if there are the right words to justify this," she began when we found ourselves alone in the hallway while the rest of the family chatted. "There's no need for justification," I replied. "I don't need explanations. It's all clear." Her eyes held sympathy, but not the shallow pity I sometimes saw from others. It was genuine understanding, and it was exactly what I had been longing for since learning the truth about Amanda and Jake. "What they did was disgusting. You didn't deserve that, Mark. You've always been good to her," Laura said, her voice trembling slightly. She didn't hide her emotions, and that made me feel her sincerity. Laura stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder, as if trying to offer comfort. I felt the warmth of her presence, and it was like a small reminder that there are people who truly understand what you're going through. Mark, I know what you've been through. I can imagine how much it hurts. I'm so sorry she betrayed you like that. But you need to know that what she did, that was her choice, not yours. And you deserve better, Laura said, and her words resonated deeply within me. I looked at her, and in that moment, I felt a tremendous sense of relief. Laura wasn't trying to convince me that everything would be okay or that things could be fixed. She simply accepted my feelings, and that was what I had been missing for so long. Laura, I don't even know what to say, I admitted, shoving my hands into my pockets, trying not to show my emotions. I never imagined you'd feel this way. It was a real betrayal, and I don't understand how it happened. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. Don't think about it, Mark. I'm here, and I want you to know that if you ever need to talk, or just need someone to be there, I'm always here for you. You deserve happiness, and I know you'll find it, Laura said, her words sounding like genuine support. I felt the heavy weight I'd been carrying since Amanda's betrayal began to lift. Laura wasn't judging me or offering unsolicited advice. She was simply there, and that gave me strength. After that conversation, we sat on the couch for a while, quietly watching the others in the room. She didn't force her opinions, but I felt her support in every glance, in every word. And although I didn't know what lay ahead, I felt that someone finally understood me and my pain. Mark, she said after a few moments of silence, I don't know how things will end between you and Amanda, but I know it's important for you to let it go. Don't let her break you completely. I know, I replied, but that moment was exactly what I needed, a genuine sense of support that allowed me to believe that not everything was lost. After that evening, when Laura and I had our first open conversation, I began to seek out more opportunities to see her. She felt like a breath of fresh air after a long, stifling period. Each of our conversations became a lifeline for me, a way to understand that I could still move forward. We started talking more and more. Laura was calm, attentive, and I often caught myself thinking that her presence had become more important to me than I wanted to admit. Every time we spoke, I felt that I didn't need to explain everything. She understood me without words. She truly listened. It was unusual because I had grown so accustomed to having to explain everything in my relationship with Amanda. Each conversation with Laura felt like a balm that eased my pain. You know, sometimes I think that everything with Amanda and Jake happened for a reason. I told Laura once as we sat in a cafe, drinking coffee and laughing over old photographs. Maybe I wouldn't have realized how many people actually support me if it weren't for all this. Laura looked at me with such calm and understanding that I didn't feel ashamed of my words. Mark, she began, her voice soft but firm. It's been hard, I know, but I've always thought you deserve better. And look, you're still moving forward, even after all this. We started spending more time together. Sometimes we just walked in the park, other times we sat on a bench in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. I felt that her presence gave me strength. She didn't try to make me forget what had happened, but she helped me see a world where I could be happy without Amanda. You know, I've always thought that people only change through suffering, that you have to go through hell to understand what really matters, Laura said one evening as we sat in her apartment, sharing a bottle of wine. But now I see that even through pain, you can become stronger. You've changed, Mark, and I can see you slowly coming back to yourself. Her words and our moments together became a path to recovery for me. She didn't rush me, didn't impose her advice. She was just there, and I felt myself becoming more open to new possibilities every day. We began laughing more together. Her humor was light and joyful, and I felt the heavy tension I had carried from Amanda's betrayal slowly fading. Laura helped me see that life doesn't end after painful events. One day, we were sitting in the park, watching the sun set over the horizon. Laura turned to me and said, "Mark, I know this might sound strange, but I'm glad you're in my life. You're a good person, and you deserve to be happy. Even if nothing happens between us, I'll always support you." Those words, though filled with kindness, made my heart race. I realized that something more had developed between us. It wasn't just friendship, it was something that could grow into a real relationship, one where I could be myself without lies or pain. We stayed on that bench long after the sun had set. I looked at her, and with every passing moment, I felt my heart slowly coming back to life. And while I wasn't ready to step into a new relationship just yet, I knew this could be the start of something significant, something real. Laura became the light that helped me see that even after the greatest betrayals and pain, there's a path to happiness. And though I wasn't yet ready to forget everything that had happened with Amanda, I understood that there was still a chance for a new beginning. One ordinary day, when I wasn't expecting it, Laura and I walked into a cafe. She was with me, as always, supporting me. I had started to feel more at ease, rebuilding my life after all those difficult moments, but this encounter brought me right back to the past. We sat at a table by the window, enjoying a cup of coffee and chatting about little things. Everything was calm, as usual, but then I saw them, Amanda and Jake, sitting at a corner table. They were like two shadows, almost unnoticeable among the other patrons, but I recognized them immediately. Jake looked somber and withdrawn, which was unlike his usual behavior. He was quiet, almost too quiet. His eyes were sunken, and he wasn't looking at Amanda, even though she was trying to talk to him. Their silence spoke louder than any words. Amanda looked as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. She seemed nervous, her shoulders slumped, and her face showed signs of suffering. And then, as I sat there observing, our eyes met. Amanda saw me and instantly pressed her lips together. She tried to appear normal, but I noticed how her body tensed when she saw Laura next to me. That was the moment I realized. She saw Laura, and it reminded her of what she had lost. Laura and I stood up and walked toward their table. Each step felt heavy, but I was ready for this meeting. Amanda looked at me with sorrow-filled eyes. Her face was different, as if she had gone through something incredibly difficult. Jake sat there, avoiding our gaze, as if he were hiding from his own guilt. "Mark," Amanda said, her voice trembling, her eyes brimming with tears. "I made a mistake. I didn't realize what I had until it was too late. You were my everything, and I didn't appreciate you until I lost you." Her words didn't bring me relief. On the contrary, they felt hollow, like an attempt to justify her actions. I had long ago accepted that there was no going back. "You chose him," I replied calmly, showing no emotion on my face. "Now you have what you wanted, and now it's your choice. I can't bring back what we had." Amanda averted her gaze, her lips trembling, but I didn't stop. I felt that all of this was just empty words and that our relationship no longer held any meaning. It was the bitter truth I had already accepted. At that moment, Laura quietly came up beside me and took my hand. I felt her warmth and calm, and it gave me a sense of stability. Her presence was exactly what I needed at that moment. I looked at her, and in her eyes, I saw a look of support that made me feel I wasn't alone anymore. Laura smiled at me softly, and I felt a sense of confidence bloom in my heart. This was what I had been searching for: unconditional support, true love that had nothing to do with what I had once felt for Amanda. "Mark," Laura said, looking at me, "this was your journey. You didn't lose. You won, even if it feels hard right now. You won because you stayed true to yourself. And that's what matters most." I looked at Laura, and in her words, I found the truth. Together, We could face anything, and that was more important to me than any victory or defeat. I glanced at Amanda. She stood there in the shadows, and I realized I felt nothing for her anymore. She had made her choice, and now I had to move forward, leaving all of this behind. Laura and I walked out of the cafe, holding hands, and it was the best decision I could have made. Laura and I started a new life together. After everything I went through with Amanda, each day, without unnecessary drama, felt like a gift. Slowly, step by step, I began to feel like I could trust again. Laura was the person who helped me restore my faith in people. Her kindness, sincerity, and warmth were evident in every interaction. She was quiet, but her words always carried support. We spent a lot of time together, walking around the city, reading books, watching old movies, and laughing over simple things. But the most important thing I felt with Laura was peace. The kind of peace I had been missing before. I didn't constantly worry if she would betray me or hide something from me. We began to communicate on a deeper level than I ever thought possible. I started sharing my feelings, my thoughts, even those I had never admitted to anyone. Laura listened without judgment, and that was what mattered most. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sun set over the horizon. It was in that moment that I realized how much had changed. I no longer felt the burden, no longer carried the pain I once held after the betrayal. Laura was there, and with every moment, I began to believe that true happiness wasn't about external factors or material wealth. It was about having someone by your side with whom you could truly be yourself. "Mark," Laura said as we sat in silence, looking out at the city lights illuminating the evening. "I know this might sound cliché, but I'm so happy we met. You have no idea how much it means to me." I looked at her and felt my heart beat more steadily. "I'm happy too," I replied. "I don't know how this happened, but you've given me a chance to see that I can trust again." We started planning our future. There was nothing grand or complicated, just dreams of creating our little perfect reality where we could be together, free from worries and mistrust. She didn't try to change me or reshape my life to fit her expectations. Laura accepted me for who I was, with all my flaws and experiences. And for that, I felt deeply grateful. Through Laura, I came to understand that happiness isn't about finding the perfect person, but about being the perfect partner for someone else. We built our relationship on honesty and support, and that was what mattered, not fiery passion, but a real, stable foundation on which something bigger could be built. One day, we were relaxing in a small cafe in the park. She laughed at my jokes, and I laughed at hers. These were the moments when I felt that true happiness lies in simplicity. I no longer thought about everything that had happened with Amanda. The betrayals, the broken promises, the shattered hearts. What mattered now was what we had together, as two people who found solace in each other. "Mark, do you know that we can do anything as long as we're together?" Laura said as we sat on a bench by the lake. I looked at her and smiled. "I know, Laura," I replied, taking her hand. "I know that now." We continued building our life together, step by step. It was a true partnership, without hidden agendas or pain. The feeling that I could be myself again gave me the strength and confidence to move forward. I realized that life after betrayal didn't have to be the end. It could be the beginning of something new, something better. And I found that in Laura. She was my new beginning. After I left Amanda, everything changed. At first, I focused on rebuilding my life with Laura and didn't think much about what was happening with them, Amanda and Jake. But as months passed, I began to notice how tension between them grew. It seemed like Jake became more distant with each passing day. He started avoiding Amanda, and their meetings became less frequent, their conversations increasingly strained. Amanda often called me, telling me how Jake no longer paid attention to her, how he dragged out his days at work and came home late, barely saying a word. I felt a strange sense of justice, but there was no desire in me to return to that drama. With every conflict they had, I saw their story unraveling. Jake began acting as though he was trying to escape all commitments, while Amanda, desperate to salvage the relationship, became more and more disillusioned. She seemed to realize that her life was now void of love or support. Each of her steps reminded me why I no longer wanted to be part of that chaos. One evening, I was at home with Laura when I received a message from Amanda. She said she wanted to meet and talk. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. She looked anxious, as if she didn't know what to do next, and her words confirmed it. "Mark," she said as we sat on a park bench, "I don't know what to do. I've lost everything. Jake doesn't want to be with me anymore. He doesn't love me. He's just here out of habit. She paused, her voice trembling. I made a mistake. I sat in silence, listening to her. There was no longer any pain in me as there had been before. Now it felt like just another of many betrayals I had left behind. I looked at her with a neutral expression as she spoke about how hard it was to live with the realization that she had chosen the wrong person. "Is this your reckoning?" I asked, looking at her calmly. She lowered her eyes. "Yes," she said quietly. "I left you for him, and now I'm alone. Jake isn't the man I loved anymore, and I don't know how to start over." I said nothing, feeling that her words were empty. She hadn't just lost me. She had lost what we had together. Her choice was final, and now it had become her reality. Meanwhile, Jake remained distant. I ran into him a few times, but he always avoided eye contact. He couldn't look me in the eye whenever we crossed paths. His eyes were dark and hollow, and I knew he regretted it, but it didn't matter anymore. Jake avoided not just me, but everyone else, even his friends. His behavior became increasingly withdrawn, and I realized that what was happening in his life was more than just a failed relationship. Jake seemed to feel that he had betrayed not only me, but also himself. I could see it, but I had no intention of excusing him. Eventually, I learned that Amanda was left on her own. Jake left without explanation, abandoning her in complete solitude. She sought me out, trying to understand how it had all gone so wrong, but I was no longer the person she could turn to in an attempt to fix things. Now, as I looked at my life with Laura, I realized this was my victory. Laura and I were building our life together. I hadn't just won in these relationships. I had gained what Amanda and Jake could never find: true happiness without lies or betrayal. I didn't pity Amanda. Her choices led to her downfall, and now she was left to watch as Laura and I built our life, free of the mistakes they had made. The terrace of our home was a peaceful place where everything quieted down as night approached. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of approaching rain. The leaves in the garden rustled softly in the light breeze, and the glow from streetlights created a warm atmosphere. I stood there, watching the sunset dip below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple. It was a moment of tranquility when everything, both around me and within me, felt still. Laura brought out coffee. She wore her usual simple and comfortable clothes that only added to her charm. In her hands was a warm cup of coffee, and her presence felt like solace. She sat next to me, placing the cup on the terrace railing, and gently took my hand, stroking it softly. We sat in silence, but there was no heaviness in it, just the feeling that we were in sync, breathing as one. The warmth of her touch gave me peace, and I forgot everything that had come before as we sat there together. We watched the sun dip below the horizon, the sky gradually darkening, and the first stars appearing. There was something special in every moment, simple but meaningful. "Thank you for being here," I said, trying to convey all my feelings, though even those words felt inadequate to express what I truly felt. I saw Laura smile. Her eyes sparkled, and I realized it wasn't just a smile. It was the expression of someone who knew her presence mattered, whose support was genuine. "I'll always be here, Mark," she replied softly, her voice warm and assured. It was a promise, but not the kind that felt forced. She wasn't trying to convince me of anything. She was just there by my side when I needed it most. She was my anchor, and I knew I could rely on her. We sat there, gazing at the endless sky, feeling time flow slowly and effortlessly. The silence between us was calm, not tense, and it was a moment when everything felt right. Our souls, our hearts, our dreams. We didn't need words to be together. Our shared glances spoke more than any conversation ever could. Sometimes, to find what's real, you have to lose what's fake. My story isn't about revenge. It's about getting a second chance to find myself. I said it softly, almost in a whisper, as if not to disturb the moment. This was my truth, what I genuinely felt. Now I knew that happiness doesn't come from seeking it in external things or other people. Happiness comes from within, and it became possible because of Laura. She smiled at me again and rested her head gently on my shoulder, softly pressing against me. I could feel her breathing, and it was incredibly soothing. We stayed there in silence for a while longer, simply watching as the night enveloped the city. And even though there were so many stories and pain around us, this moment was ours alone. The camera slowly pans away, leaving us on the terrace, surrounded by the serenity of the night. The sun had already set, leaving only the street lights and the moonlight illuminating us. Laura and I sat together, and I knew I had found my path again. It wasn't a victory over anyone. It was a victory over myself. And I had no doubts anymore.